Today, we would learn about stigma towards mental health conditions and how people have dealt with it. A person is made to feel from a whole person to a discounted one, where he feels excluded, discriminated, and looked down upon. So stigma is a big issue in mental health and severe mental disorders. A person feeling stigma may have an experience of shame. Why am I having this? The need to be secret about his condition and not be open about it. That's quite common. A person also may feel ashamed of having this condition and blame himself or herself. There are lots of stereotypes about mental health conditions, and often patients feel isolated and excluded, and they do have a sense of discrimination by the society towards them. As mental health workers, we need to be ourselves, first of all, destigmatized, and then help the others to look after people as people, not as patients. In India specifically, sometimes the stigma against severe mental disorders is so great that people feel ashamed. Say, for example, if there is a daughter in the family who is getting to an age where she would be married, so people wouldn't, consider the alliance because somebody in the family has severe mental disorders. Very covertly, many employers would not employ someone who has a past history of mental illness, and in the occupational health questionnaire, people would often not mention about psychiatric morbidities, and this of course has an impact on how the person gets back to life and society. So these things again needs to be addressed as a much broader frame in the society so that we can all be inclusive. What are the educational interventions for stigma? It's good to target specific groups, and before you target a group to reduce stigma, it's important to know their attitudes, and that would help us to have a program where the specific attitudes are targeted. There is no evidence as such of community backlash if you do a stigma reduction program. Being flexible with public education packages, smaller group work often is very useful. What works best is if the stigma reduction process or the program is continuous and goes over years. That may have some effect. Mental illness, especially people with severe mental disorders, may have been portrayed as psycho killers, or someone who is indulgent and spends a lot of money, or with unending sexual urge or libidinous impulses, or someone who is pathetic and sad. They also have been figures of fun. Their family members and the society at large may think that they're hiding behind the garb of a mental illness and they're pretending. So that itself is stigmatizing for a person who is suffering. Depression campaign like "You're Not Alone" had been used in advert by a multinational, and this was criticized and was taken off. Similarly, there was a t-shirt which was taken out from the market on suicide watch. The indulgent portrayal of mania of someone, often a lady, spending a lot of money, again gives a stereotype to bipolar illness. Violence and mental illness often has been portrayed together. This is stigmatizing. So there is very little association between severe mental disorders and violence. Most people who had been violent do not have a mental illness, and most people who have been mentally ill do not get involved in violent acts. So these are the stereotypes of mental illness that we need to break in the society and first of all in ourselves. What are the ways you can break stigma? The primary prevention against stigma would often be public education and influencing how mental illnesses and severe mental disorders are portrayed in the public domain. Also, occupational policies about mental health conditions so that it helps people to get back to work and life would be helpful. Legislation to prevent discrimination is also something which people are looking into. rehabilitating someone who has faced bullying for being mentally ill, and helping with advocacy for someone who has faced discrimination reduces stigma as well. We would like to conclude that stigma against mental disorders are widely prevalent, and stigma reduction is important for good rehabilitation of any patient who has been through an experience of severe mental disorders. Statutory agencies, corporates, civil society, everybody has to rise up to this and help us reduce stigma.